Hi, and welcome to another one of my advice videos. Today we are going to be discussing complex dementia symptoms. So before we get into it, I want to first of all say a few things about this video. This video is primarily designed for carers that are supporting somebody living with dementia. If you yourself have dementia, or you've been diagnosed with dementia or of any type recently and you're trying to find out more information about the subject, you may find some of the topics and things discussed in this video upsetting. So I would advise probably not to continue watching it past this point. Now, it's worth bearing in mind and always remembering that with dementia it affects everybody differently, and some of the examples that we discuss are things that happen infrequently. It's not that they won't happen, but you can take on these things and think that, oh no, this is going to happen to me and it's going to be dreadful, when actually that may not be the case. So, as I say, if you are going to proceed past this point, do bear that in mind. Equally, if you're a carer with somebody who is at an early stage of the condition and they haven't yet presented very complex conditions or symptoms relating to the dementia, then again you may also sort of take a little too much away from it, if you see what I mean. So do proceed with caution. If you are dealing with somebody who has complex dementia symptoms and you're supporting them and trying to work out what's best for them and what's best for you, then I always advise that first of all you should try and get support local to you with that. So it may well be in your local area that you have a dementia advice service. Often these are linked into the NHS, so that when you go through the diagnosis process you're immediately referred to a dementia advisor. They could be with the Alzheimer Society or maybe another organisation that provides that service in your area. If you don't have access to those kind of services, the Alzheimer Society do run a telephone dementia advice service, which I believe started up this year, and that's a nationwide service. Anybody can call in. So the number should be coming up on the screen at the bottom here about now, so do jot that down. Also, there are the Admiral Nurses. The Admiral Nurses are a support service run by Dementia UK. It's a nationwide service, but it's not in every area of the country due to funding challenges that many support services have these days. So again, do check in your local area. With the Admiral Nurses, generally speaking, you have to be referred into those services. So you might do that through your GP, or you might do that through your dementia advisor. So do look into that. With any complex dementia symptoms that present, you should always seek to get some sort of medical advice on it as well. So it might well be that you go and see a GP to talk about what symptoms are presenting. If there's a sudden change in a person's behaviour, then it's unlikely that the dementia is causing that, and I do mean sudden. So if a person suddenly becomes delirious, or they're having continence problems that they didn't have before, you should always go to your GP to get that checked out, because quite often that is the result of an underlying infection of some kind. 9 times out of 10 it'll be a urine infection, but quite often it could be a chest infection as well. So always, or some other kind of infection. So always go and get those things checked out. And even some form of acute injury, maybe they've sprained their ankle or bruised their arm or something like that, which is causing them significant pain. Pain can also cause delirium and things like that. So go see your GP first of all. if the changes or the symptoms seem to have presented sort of gradually over a period of time, if you think that the person with dementia is distressed by these symptoms or is exhibiting agitation and stress as a result of them, then again you should be going to see a GP about it and possibly asking for a referral to your local older adults mental health team if there is such a service in your area. Often a memory clinic will come to a diagnosis with you, and that will stand, but that doesn't mean it stands forever. Things can change, things can develop. I've seen it where people could have been diagnosed with vascular dementia in the early stages, but as the conditions progressed and they've been reassessed, it's transpired that actually they have dementia with Lewy bodies. And getting that accurate diagnosis, even at a later stage, can be very helpful because it can define the type of support that you get and the type of things that people are able to advise you to do in order to best support a person with that condition or that particular type of that condition. So let's have a look at some of the symptoms that may present, and as I've said before, these do not present themselves in all cases by any stretch. These are, generally speaking, rare for most people, or you may have a kind of touch of these things, but they happen very occasionally. Okay, so the first one that I want to look at a little bit is aggression or violence that could crop up. Now there's different levels of aggression and violence that can crop up with somebody who has dementia, and they could be caused by a number of different factors. The effect of them can be very distressing for people that are supporting them or caring for them. If you, for example, have been married to someone for a very long time and they've always been kind and calm and friendly, fun, and suddenly they start becoming aggressive and angry all the time, then that can be quite difficult to deal with. It might be that you think that this person is doing it on purpose. Sometimes we get people saying, "Oh, they're doing it to wind me up. They're doing it on purpose," because it's very hard to see that it's not the person you know that's doing it. It's the dementia. It's the disease that's at fault. But with that said, there can often be triggers that cause those things. Now, aggression can be anything from somebody just resisting something that you might be trying to do, so it might be giving them some medication or getting them to have a shower or a bath, something like that. And it could go to sort of the other extreme ends of violent rage and explosions over seemingly inconsequential things. What we always advise people to do, or what I've advised people to do in the past, is to look at what the potential triggers might be in a situation like that. So think about what happens or what was happening when you were trying to, or when the explosion or the aggression occurred. What was going on. So it could be a number of factors. It might have been something that you were trying to do at the time, and it might have been the way that you were approaching trying to do that, and it might even be the fact that it was you trying to do that. Often people with dementia will behave quite differently when they're presented with somebody who's a professional and that's not because the professional's doing anything any differently, just because they're a different person. So there's factors like that to consider. Again, it might be tone of voice, or it might be the time of day that you're trying to do that sort of thing. Maybe they respond better to things in the morning or in the evening or whatever. The point is that you have to have a think about what those potential triggers are. Now, do bear in mind that what I'm saying is not a question of blame. We are who we are, and we do what we do. And if we have been doing something in a way that means that that doesn't work anymore and we have to find a different way, that's not because you did anything wrong. It's because of the dementia. Okay? So even if you're sat here now watching this video, it means that you're doing the right things. You're seeking support, you're seeking help, and you're seeking to find a better way of managing these situations. So don't look at it where if myself or any professional suggests to you to try a different approach, that is in no way a judgment on you and the way you've been doing things. Okay. The other thing to look at is the environment. What environmental factors are sort of going on at the time? Was the washing machine on full spin? Was there a lot of noise on the television? Was there, do you have a very busy household? Are there a lot of people coming and going? Was the person outside of the home? Were they in a location that might have seemed alien to them, even if it's somewhere they've been 100 times before? Think about those kind of things. What was it that was causing the confusion, causing the agitation, and causing the stress? So that's, like I say, some of the things that you might need to consider if you're looking at trying to avoid those situations happening again. But what do you do if these situations start occurring more frequently and you've removed potential triggers and stimulus, you've made it a positive and calm environment, and this person is still presenting with aggression or still presenting violence and things like that? Maybe they're becoming a danger to you, maybe they're becoming a danger to themselves. Okay, that can be a very distressing situation to be in. Now, what's important is, first of all, you need to think about your safety. So if somebody is getting aggressive and violent in some way, you need to extricate yourself from the situation as much as possible, whilst also making sure that that person is safe. Quite often a person may have short-term memory problems, and so extricating yourself from that situation, letting them calm down and coming back, it may well be that they've forgotten by the time you return. It might only be that you leave the living room and go and stand in the kitchen for 5 minutes. If that's not going to work, if somebody is, say, following you around the house, maybe they're trying to hit you, maybe they throw things, maybe they're just screaming and shouting and you're finding that quite upsetting, try and think about setting up some sort of emergency procedure. So it might be that you have a friend or relative that can come round and let you take some respite. Okay? It might be that you just go for a walk for 10-15 minutes and that person stays with the person with dementia, just to make sure that they're safe. But obviously, don't do that if the person that's going to come round is going to be at risk. If you think these problems are serious like that, then it needs to be addressed very quickly and with professionals. As I say, speaking with your dementia advisor or with the admiral nurses can be helpful in a situation like this, but it may also be, as I mentioned before, that they need to be reassessed by the mental health team. It may be that that person might need, while this is happening, might need to go into care for a short while to give you some respite. It may also be, and it is rare for this to happen, it may also be that they may need to be sectioned. And I say that with trepidation because it's not a nice situation to have to go through for anybody, but sometimes it is the best thing for a person's safety as well as your safety. And if that person gets the treatment that they need while they're in hospital, it may well be that things are diminished and that person's able to return home to you soon. If that's not the case, then it might be that you look at some sort of long-term care situation. And again, all of these things are very distressing emotionally to have to deal with. So please do pick up the phone and call someone and get support if that's what's on the cards. But think about all those particular options. Hopefully, as I say, that sort of thing won't happen for you, or if it is happening, as I say, go and seek that support. So that's, like I say, a brief overview of what you might do with aggressive symptoms presenting themselves, or symptoms of aggression. You, like I said, my advice on that is not exhaustive, and don't take what I'm saying as being the final word on that, because it isn't. As I say, seek as much help as possible. So let's move on from that and have a look at hallucinations. So quite often people will develop hallucinations as a symptom. This is very common if somebody suffers with dementia with Lewy bodies, and often the hallucinations are an indicator and used as a diagnostic indicator for saying that somebody does have dementia with Lewy bodies. It also presents itself with people with Alzheimer's, particularly in the late moderate stages and the later stages. It can crop up with frontal temporal dementia, as well as for people who have things like post-cortical atrophy, where they get visual distortions and visual disturbances and they're not able to judge distances. Their spatial awareness becomes affected. So hallucinations of all kinds can crop up. Some of them can be quite minor. So, for example, with my nan, when she had Alzheimer's, we think she probably had Alzheimer's with Parkinson's, though we're not 100% sure about that. She would have kind of positive hallucinations in a way. So if somebody left a jumper on a chair, and it was in a sort of ball, she would think it was a cat. And she'd say, "Oh, what a lovely cat." And obviously we just went along with that. And we said, "Oh yes, what a lovely cat. Isn't he lovely? Look at him, oh." And then what we would do is gently distract her onto something else while somebody removed the jumper. And then she'd turn around and say, "Oh, he's gone, where's he gone?" And we'd say, "Oh, he's just gone out for some food now and he'll be back in a bit." Now in a situation like that, some people can be comforted by stuffed toys or stuffed animals, or even a bit of pet therapy if you can sort of bring a cat or a dog along to help them, sort of thing. And so things like that can be kind of useful as a way of kind of taking that hallucination and using it in a positive way. But some hallucinations don't present in a way where they can be used positively. So one client who I supported, who had dementia with Lewy bodies, when I went round and I was chatting to his wife, she said every night he's climbing up on the wall and he's trying to climb up the wall and he's rubbing it with his hands and he's saying it's all wet, it's all wet. And I sort of looked over at the wall and I said, "Well, I can see why that is." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, it's your wallpaper, because it's all sort of streaky lines like that. His eyes are giving him a visual distortion, which is making him think that there's water running down the walls." "Well, I don't know what I can do about that," she said. And I said, "Well, really the only solution there is to possibly remove the wallpaper, or have some very bright lighting at night in the lounge." And I mean very bright. With the Dementia Advice Service in Worcester, we did provide people with high lumens light bulbs, and so if that's something that you need to look out for, go and do that, because it reduces the amount of shadows on the walls. He didn't have this problem during the day, so I thought it was probably the combination of the light and the wallpaper creating those sort of slight shading and shadows. So we swapped out the light bulb, and it did reduce it a lot, but didn't get rid of it completely. The lady, his wife, was quite elderly and wasn't really about to start stripping walls. But if that is an option, then in a situation like that, you could do that. And equally, it might be a very patterned carpet. It could be a picture on the wall. Sometimes people find mirrors quite disconcerting. They don't recognise the person in the mirror, and so they get quite upset by that, or they might think that the mirror is actually a window or a door and try to go through it. So there's things like that. Equally, dark spaces on the floor can be perceived as being a hole, and somebody might not want to walk over the hole. So those kind of hallucinations can be easily managed by changing the environment or changing the thing that's causing the hallucination. There are others which can be a little bit more distressing. So, for example, we used to have a lady on our books. Her daughter contacted me one day. She was very upset. She couldn't work out why, but her mum would phone her every night at about 8 o'clock, or whatever the time was, and be complaining that there were people arguing in her lounge. Well, the reason for this was she wasn't able to change the channel, so it was always left on BBC One. And it transpired that at that time, that's when EastEnders started. And so she'd lost the concept of that these people were in the television, or non-existent essentially. She didn't understand that anymore. She thought they were actually in her living room, and she was going and standing up in the garden for quite a long period of time. And she would do this at other occasions as well, where the daughter was getting calls from neighbours saying, well, she stood up in the garden again, but we don't know why. She's just standing there and she looks very scared. So in the end, they had to reduce her use of the television. They switched over to using a radio, but that unfortunately meant that she was looking around to find the source of the voice. She thought people were in the house. So those things had to be adjusted. Equally, it might be that somebody believes there to be people in the house or something like that, even though there's no one there, or they get confused about who's in the house. And again, it's just gentle reassurance with these kind of things, trying to distract the person, trying to make them feel a little bit calmer, and things like that. But again, if this is getting problematic, then speak to your GP, speak to your admiral nurse, etc. I did have one lady with Lewy bodies who said, you're missing out on so much. And I said, why? She said, I see all these beautiful butterflies everywhere. They're all over the floor and all up the wall, and they're so pretty and so beautiful. And I feel blessed to have this. So it could be that actually a hallucination turns out to be a positive thing. So moving on from that, walking or wandering. We don't like to use the term wandering too much in dementia circles because it gives the impression that somebody's walking without purpose, and actually they may have a purpose. So something to consider first of all is security. If a person is likely to leave the house unsupervised and you've got a concern for their safety, then there's a number of things that you could do. So one of the things might be to get a tracker for them. And there's lots of different types of trackers. You can get wristwatch trackers, phone trackers, you can get insole trackers that can go in the shoe so they don't know that they've got a tracker on them. You could attach something around the neck on a lanyard or in a pocket of their favourite coat. Trackers can be set up by a local service that is monitored, or they could be attached to your phone, so you can monitor it through an app. Quite a lot of them have what they call geo-fences, so you can set a sort of a virtual area on a map, and if a person can move around within that area, it could be the boundary of your house, it might be as far as the local shop, but if they go outside that area, then you're sent an alert. So those are things to look into. They vary in price. Costs could be a one-off payment for the device and you manage it yourself, or it might be an ongoing payment to a monitored service, which can be good if you're working or busy all the time, because then a monitored service, if there was a problem, they would dispatch emergency services and they would contact you. So you don't have to keep checking yourself. and you've got no concern about if you missed the phone call because you were in a meeting, if you missed the notification on your phone, somebody would still be there to help the person in need. So there's those aspects to think about. The other thing is the Herba Protocol, which all police forces use the Herba Protocol now. It's basically a form that you download from your local police force's website. If you just type Herba Protocol into Google, you will get lots of results. If you put the name of your police force area in there, so it might be West Mercia, might be Metropolitan, whatever, those will be the results. Go through, download the form. Basically, you fill the form out. It contains all the basic information of the person living with dementia who's possibly going to go missing. You would ordinarily put a current photo of that person in the front of the form, and it also contains information about places they like to visit, places they've lived in the past, areas that they may have frequented, friends, things like that. So what this does is if somebody does go missing, you're able to give this document to the police or speak to them over the phone, give them this information, and it does aid in locating that person again very quickly. And again, if you've got a monitored tracking service or emergency service, then emergency button service, then that might be something that you pass on to them as well, or make them aware of at least. So they can be quite useful things to do. Obviously, if you start thinking about restricting a person's movement, you have to think very carefully about that, particularly if they still, arguably, legally speaking, qualify as having mental capacity. Locking somebody in a house is what we call deprivation of liberty, and for care homes and care services to make sure that somebody can't leave their room or the building, whatever it is, they have to go through what we call deprivation of liberty safeguards. So it's best that you think about those kind of things before you start restricting somebody's movement, as frustrating as that may be. If somebody is getting up in the middle of the night, putting their coat on to go home, as quite often happens, then that can be very stressful for somebody. It might be that you try some distraction techniques, just talking about something different or distracting them onto something else. If they're very insistent on going out, maybe go out for a little walk with them. Often they'll tire easily and you can just walk them back to where you were, and actually that little bit of exercise just helps to clear their mind and settle them down. So there's things you can do like that. And if you are supporting somebody like that, where you're getting up during the night to do those kind of things, it may well be that you qualify for attendance allowance. If you're not already getting it, it might provide you with some money to get a bit of respite care so that you can have a bit of a sleep during the day. Again, something to talk to your dementia advisor about. I have done a video on attendance allowance and applying for that, so do take a look at that. If you subscribe to my channel, you should be able to see it. And there are a lot of other resources on applying for attendance allowance or PIP if a person with dementia is under the age of 65. So that's those aspects. There's one more thing that I was going to cover in this video. Yes, continence. So continence is often a problem for people living with dementia and can be very complicated to deal with. A person living with dementia is quite likely to, well, not quite likely, but there's a strong possibility that they're going to develop problems with controlling their bladder, and it may also be that they develop problems controlling their bowel as well, particularly as you get towards the later stages. This again can lead to urine infections, but it also might be an indication of a urine infection. But what tends to happen is the brain does control every part of the body, and so when dementia is sort of getting a little bit more set in, it might be that the signals between the brain and the bladder and the brain and the bowel are getting interrupted or distorted somehow, and a person maybe feels like they need to go to the toilet when they don't, or doesn't feel like they need to go to the toilet when they do, and that can lead to accidents or somebody using the toilet a lot or things like that. Obviously with this, it's important to speak to the GP. Again, it may be that you can ask for referral into Continence service if your local authority has one. Your NHS trust has one. They may well provide you with some items that could support with that. There could be collection devices, or it could be pads that would support with that. There may be a restriction on how much they're able to provide you with, or at what level they can provide you those things. So if you do take advice from them, then do shop around. Often the suppliers that the NHS might give to you to top up your supply can be expensive, whereas if you shop around on the internet for continence services, you might find that they're a lot cheaper. Age UK, for example, have a continence service that provides pretty much every type of continence pad you can think of for any volume that is much cheaper, and you can buy in bulk and save more money, sort of thing. So do shop around as much as possible. One of the most complicated things with dealing with this is that a person may lose their understanding of what body waste is, and so it might be that if certain materials are produced, that the person isn't able to think to themselves, well, actually this needs to go down the toilet, and it may be that they handle it with their hands themselves, and it may be that they transfer those materials onto other surfaces around the home or on their clothes or something like that. When that happens, it can be very stressful, very distressing, and sometimes it can be quite surprising when it occurs. In those situations, you will be forgiven for losing your temper, but try to stay as calm as possible. It's very difficult. This applies to everything really, but it's something worth considering. Take your time, get them cleaned up first of all, then look at getting the place cleaned up. Call for help if you can. It might be a friend, a relative, a neighbour. Get them to come and sit with the person with dementia and give you the time to address those issues. If you've got appointments and things like that, it doesn't matter. They can be rearranged. So yes, that's a brief overview of some of the complex problems with dementia. I will put the relevant phone numbers and information in the comments below. I would say don't make comments on this, but go to the Alzheimer Society website. They have a good forum there, and you'll be able to do all sorts and talk to a lot of other peers in a similar position. Thanks for watching.